Hi, this is iArchitect here for a live Q&A. So, you're scared about possibility of getting a cowboy builder. How do you avoid that? What happens if you have a builder who comes in and your house falls down, or they drill through the water main and they cause a massive flood, or they take months and months and months and months to finish the work and you're stuck there either living through all that dust and disruption, or you're spending a fortune renting somewhere else to live? What happens if, they're so bad that they do all this work but it's terrible and it needs to all be redone, ripped out and redone again because it's so bad? These are so common for people to fear, especially if you've never done any building work before in your home and you're looking at spending a significant portion of maybe your life savings, and you're looking at making your personal space somewhere beautiful, somewhere you want to live, and you're really looking forward to having this dream home, but you've never experienced this whole process of getting from going through a build, and you're really afraid of that. And what can you do to make all these what ifs? What if the house falls down? What if the flood happens? What if there's a massive delay? What if these things happen? There's things that you can do, and I'm going to talk to you, go through some of the things you can do, and one really big key thing that you can do and how you can get that right. And if you've got any questions at all, any questions about, if you've got any big fears about your build and you're worried about something, pop a comment below and I'll address that during the live Q&A, or if it's replay, put #replay and I'll come back and answer your questions. And if you have experienced this, pop your comments below and help everybody out and let us learn from your mistakes or your unfortunate mistakes. So, who am I? I'm Jane. I'm a chartered architect. I am founding director of iArchitect, and I specialise in helping homeowners of period property make beautiful, characterful, comfortable homes that suit you and your modern lifestyle, and that are gonna, sorry, I've just noticed, hi Russell, nice to see you watching, suit you, your modern lifestyle, and are gonna help you protect the planet as well. We all want to do our bit, don't we? So what can you do to prevent all these what ifs? So first of all, and maybe this is a bit obvious, is be really selective about your builder. So I can go into that, how to select a good builder. I can go into that in another one. That's not going to be the focus of today's live, but that is a really important thing to do. Make sure you get the right builder from the outset, and there are things that you can do to give yourself the best chance of getting a really good builder. The biggest and most important thing to do is to get a contract in place. Having a contract is going to help protect you from so many problems that could occur. But you don't just want any contract. You want to make sure that it's the right contract for you. So we're going to talk about a couple of the things that you can look out for, read into your contract, and make sure that you're covered and it's the right contract for you and you're going to be protected, or it's going to help prevent some of these what ifs, the things that you're most afraid of happening in your home build from happening. So what can you do? First of all, you can check, have a good read through. I know nobody wants to read through the contract, but honestly, this is going to potentially save you so much money, save you so much stress, save you so much hassle, and it's going to help you get that dream home that you want. So read the contract. It's not going to take you half an hour to do it. Just do it. And check the clauses. You want to be looking for, who does this clause favour? And a really big clue about which contract to go for is to look at which organisation wrote the contract. I would say if you're looking at a project that's for your home. You don't want to be going for some sort of weird bespoke contract that's being written by a lawyer and has got no case law behind it. You want to be going for a contract that has got tons of case law behind it, has been tried and tested in the courts, and that is being proven to give you the security that you want and you need. So look at there are lots of different organizations who write contracts, and some of the most common ones, the JCT, which is the Joint Contract Tribunal, and that is an organisation which is made up of lots of different construction professionals. So their contracts are very well balanced. They're not in any one particular person's favour. And when I say person, I mean, you know, the builder, the client, the construction professional who might be helping you on your project, maybe doing contract administration for you. They're not in any one person's favour, so they're very balanced and they are a good option to go with. There is the Federation of Master Builders and other contractors organisations. Those contracts tend to be much more in the favour of the contractor. So I would say use one of those contracts. It's at your own risk to use one of those contracts. Make sure you really check the clauses thoroughly and make sure that either you ask for amendments to clauses where you feel like it's not in your best favour, or just don't use them. And another option are things like the RIBA suites of contracts. There's a lot of contracts that the RIBA create, and the RIBA contracts, because they are written by an architects body. The RIBA is the Royal Institute of British Architects. The FMB is the Federation of Master Builders. So obviously that's more builders contracts. The RIBA, the architects, as architects tend to be employed by clients, then architects tend to be much more on your side. Although during the construction, if we're doing contract administration, we have to be completely completely balanced and fair in the way that we treat both the contractor and you as the client. So we can't just completely act totally in your favour. We have to act fairly. But in terms of advising you before the construction starts, we would be advising you in your favour in terms of what contract to go with. An RIBA contract tends to be slightly more in the favour of the client. So that's where and there are lots and lots of other contracts, but you know, JCT tends to be fairly balanced. FMB tends to be more in favour for the builder, and RIBA tends to be more in favour of you as a client. So that's one good way to sort of figure out which contract you might want to go to. You want to read through those clauses and think about what's your biggest fear. You know, what happens if there's a massive delay? The builders just send one person a day on site and there's just no work happening and nothing's going on, and when's it going to end? So you want to make sure that there's an end date in there. Maybe there's some clause that says, you know, if there's then if it overruns that time and there's no good reason for it, it's just because the builder is not sort of working diligently and taking care to complete the work. If it's more a case of, what's the word? I'm losing my words. If it's more a case of, you know, maybe they've got another project on that's paying them better or something, or has got a contract with a clause in it that sort of holds them to a deadline, then what you want to do is have a deadline in place, and then you can put in there for any reasonable costs that it's going to cause you. So perhaps if you are renting somewhere to live while work is being done to your home, then that is an extra cost that it's costing you to not have moved in if it's not completed. So you could then charge that to the builder and they have to pay for that extra cost because of their delay. What happens if they cause damage? Well, there are different sorts of insurances. You want to make sure you've got the right insurance in place and that your contractor is also fully insured, and you want to check those things out and find out what their insurance covers for. What is the scale of the work? So the scale of the work will determine which contract you go for. So some contracts, so the JCT contracts, for example, there's a homeowner's contract, which is really, really, really simple. And you don't need to have an architect working with you when you're working on that, using that contract. It's a really simple, extremely simple one. You can choose to have an architect as a contract administrator as well. So you've got the choice of doing that if you want to and use the very simple homeowner's contract. For anything other than very small projects, it's not really the ideal contract to use because it's not robust enough and doesn't have enough clauses to cover you for all the eventualities. But even so, it's better to have a contract in place than no contract in place. So if that's the only contract that you can get your head around, then put something simple in place, even better than nothing. So the scale of the work, then who is designing the work? So there are contracts which are what they're called design and build contracts. So that's where you would usually you would employ a design and build contractor. And a design and build contractor means that they do the design work in-house. So you would not usually have gone to an architect before working with them. You would go directly to the design and build contractor and they would do your design work. What you will tend to find is that either if they're really good quality, high quality, then they maybe don't have in-house designers. They actually work with architects. So you may feel like you're saving yourself architect's fees, but actually the architect's fees are in there, but they're just inside the cost. So you don't see them as a separate item. And you have a lot less control over the design work, to be honest. Or you can go for more of a traditional route where you tend to get an architect. More traditionally, you get your architect, your designer to do the design work, and then you get the contractor after all your design work has been done, completed. And that is really key. Part of your contract is to all of the drawings, all the decisions that have been made beforehand. Because one thing, builders, there's a lot of fear about builders, but most builders, they're not cowboys. Most builders are good and they're honest and they're hardworking and they're not out to rip you off. They just want to make a good living, and they get a lot of satisfaction out of having done a good job as well. So, you don't need to be afraid of builders, but what you do need to do is make sure that you've told them exactly what you want, because one thing that builders are not is mind readers. They do not have any idea about what it is that you want until you tell them, and there's no point asking them for a price when you're not telling them really what you want them to price. So you want to make sure that you've made all your decisions, you've got everything down in paper, it's all there in black and white, indisputable, and that becomes part of your contract as well. So when your builder has read your drawings, they put a price against it, they know what it is that they're supposed to be delivering. They haven't had to read your mind, it's there, they can see it, and nobody can dispute it. And that's what you need to have. That's part of your contract. All of those drawings and documents that are produced is all part of your contract. And if you haven't employed somebody to do that, then at the very least, write a list of everything that you're expecting your builder to do and use that as part of your contract. That would, technically, it would be called something like a schedule of works. So you could title it that if you want, a schedule of works, and then list out everything that you want to be done to your house, and then use that alongside with the contract, and that will make it much more difficult for somebody at a later date to say, but you didn't ask me to do that, so that's going to cost you extra. Or you didn't have asked me to do that before, and I didn't know that that needed to be done, so it took a lot more time to do it, and so that's why it's not finished yet. So these are all the things that you need to have as part of your contract. It's the contract document itself, plus all of the decisions and all of the information that you're giving to your builder so that they know what it is they're supposed to be doing. Who is delivering the build? So obviously it's your builder, isn't it? Surely. But a lot of builders work as contractors, and a contractor, what they do is they have a contract with you, and then they tend to have a contract with lots of subcontractors, and the subcontractors tend to be the ones who are actually delivering the work. Some contractors have an in-house team, and that in-house team may cover, you know, they might have a joiner, they might have a bricklayer, they might have what else would they tend to have? A couple of labourers maybe, and they wouldn't necessarily then have lots of other specialists on top of that, so they might then subcontract out the electrical work, the plumbing, maybe the plasterer would be a subcontractor, perhaps the roofer is a subcontractor. These are all really specialist trades and really skilled trades. And that's, though it's up to the contractor themselves to choose those. However, you can, if you want to, you can say to your contractor, well, I have this electrician that has done all the work on my house before, and I really trust this electrician, and I would like you to use that particular electrician. You can do that, but be very, very mindful that if your electrician lets down the contractor, then that's your fault and you're responsible for that. And if that causes a delay and that costs the contractor money, then you can end up being responsible for paying extra because of the delay caused by somebody that you've chosen, you've instructed them to use. So in a lot of cases, it's a lot less risky for you to just let your contractor select the team that they want to work with. If you've got a highly specialised project, say for example you've got a listed building, historic home, maybe you've got a beautiful mosaic that you want to protect, and you've done your research and you found someone who's highly specialised in restoring mosaics, well then of course you can get them on board. Just be mindful that, you know, there are, depending on the contract that you have with them and the contract that then the arrangements that are in place with them, the other contractor, the main contractor, that could cause you problems. You want to be really certain that any subcontractors are definitely going to deliver. And then that then comes into who's responsible if it all goes wrong. So you've got the main contractor, you've got the subcontractors, you've got the suppliers, you know, the places that the trade centres that they've gone to buy their products from. You've got the manufacturers, and all of these different stages in the process. They all could, something could go wrong, for example, with your render. It might start to spoil or split or burst off the wall. Well, whose fault is it? Maybe it's the render itself wasn't up to the job. Maybe it was the renderer, a subcontractor, usually a specialist subcontractor. Maybe it was their fault. Maybe it was contractor's fault because they didn't really program the work very well, and they ended up getting the render done and it was actually too cold, and it's the frozen kind of night when after that render was put in that caused the problems. So, you know, there can be a bit of a minefield. So you want to be making sure that you've chosen, either you want to be choosing the materials that you're using and making sure that they are being used in accordance to the requirements for those manufacturers. So whether they have to be installed by a specifically certified installer, and any specific requirements. So it has to be done when there's, you know, the temperature's above 5 degrees or whatever it is. So those are things that you need to make sure you can keep an eye on it, or and also point it out to the contractor. You know, these are the things that you need to make sure that it is done in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. And if it's not done in accordance with manufacturer's recommendations, then the manufacturer will say, not our fault, it's your builder's fault because they did it wrong. And then what happens? Your main contractor will be responsible for their subcontractors. If they chose the subcontractor, it's their responsibility. They will then have to seek, they will have to then go for the subcontractor themselves and get them to sort out the problem. But that's for him to sort out, and him could be a woman, but it's for them to sort out between them. The contractor is the person who's responsible for that in that sort of situation. So whose fault is it? Whose fault is always a problem. You know, you always want to be able to avoid that whole conversation, whose fault is it? If you can do as much as you can to avoid it ever getting to that point, that's what you want to do, because starting the whole blame game and pointing fingers, it's nobody wins really at the end of the day. If it gets to that point, nobody's really winning. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Best way to avoid that is to have regular conversations, communicate, and don't get nasty and angry. Just talk about things and try and find solutions to the problems. Sometimes things are going to get delayed. Sometimes things are going to cost a bit more. It shouldn't cost crazy amounts more. It shouldn't be massively delayed. Sometimes that can happen. There are times when, you know, the beast from the east comes around, there's a massive snowstorm, nobody can do any work. Unfortunately, depending on the contract, somebody is going to have to pay for that if there are costs, you know, if it creates a cost, and that might be you. And unfortunately, that's just how things happen. Possibly you can get insurance for that. Insurance is another thing that you can get, but sometimes the cost of the insurance just makes it not worthwhile. Depends on the risk, and it depends on how important that sorting out that risk is to you. So another key thing is to look at payments. Everybody wants to get paid. You want to know how much money you've got to have available at what times. The builders want to be paid so they can make sure that they're able to pay their costs, able to pay the staff wages, able to pay for the products that they need to use on your building, all of these things. So you want to have, and actually I think it's a legal requirement now anyway, you have to have it. You have to have some sort of time scale or schedule of payments in there, so you know roughly what to expect, so you know roughly what to look out for, where the builder's likely to have finished pouring the foundations, finished building up the brick walls, finished whatever, finished the roof, finished the electrics, finished the central heating. You want to have some idea of what stage the builder's going to have finished up to and when, and how much you then owe them for that part of the work. Simple as that really, but it's what's been done, how much does it cost? And then there's the whole issue of defects. What does defects mean? Defects means where things are not quite right. There's something that's not maybe quite right, or maybe it's just some water's got in, or things have moved a little bit, because buildings do move, they settle, wind happens, all sorts of stuff can make things change around a little bit. And okay, you don't want that to be happening too much. You don't want to be seeing everything moving around. That's not normal. But a little bit of movement, that's a settlement, that's normal. So getting a few hairline cracks in your plaster, that's normal, that will happen. It's quite common. But you want to, when you're making your payments, There needs to be some process in there where you are not paying 100%. Maybe you're paying 97%, maybe you're paying 95% of that amount, but you're withholding, you're keeping hold of 3%, 5%, whatever it is that you agree with your contractor and you have down in your contract. I would say typically the smaller the project, the less likely you are to have a builder agree to either any retention or any significant amount of retention. And obviously they need to have cash flow, and that they're running a business. They're not doing it for, laughs. But you want to have this money set aside and kept for a certain amount of time. So you want to be able to perhaps see, go through a couple of seasons, perhaps to see, perhaps test that if there are any leaks in the roof, or if it's particularly windy and you're actually getting wind blowing through a gap that's not being properly sealed. All these little things, you've got enough time to be able to check on them and for the building to settle and any little hairline cracks to appear, and then you've got enough money for there to be enough of an incentive. There are lots of other incentives for a good builder to come back and make good any small defects, because they want you to be referring them in the future to other people. They want to have a good record behind them, and they don't want to be feeling like you've had they've done a bad job. So there are other sort of reasons why a builder would want to come back, but having some sort of financial incentive for them to make sure that they come back and fix things is always good. You're probably unlikely to be able to persuade a small contractor working on a small job to allow you to have a retention that's going to then allow you to pay for somebody else to come in and do that work and make it good if they weren't in a position to. Perhaps they go bankrupt or whatever. But having something is better than having nothing, isn't it? So that's a key thing, to make sure that you know when you're going to be paying and for what, and that you are always holding back a small amount of that, and that you've got an agreement in place as to at what point do you then release that and you pay them the final amount that you owe them, because at the end of the day you do owe them that money. It is their money, you're just holding it back to allow for potential for defects to happen, but you can't keep hold of that forever. You do have to pay them a bit. What happens if something unexpected occurs? There's so many unexpected things that can occur in buildings, and part of the process of going through a proper, thoroughly investigated design process is that you can really start to find out potential problems and come up with possible solutions, options that you can put in play if the worst comes to the worst. Now, what I often find is that people are in a hurry, they want to get stuff done quickly. Like slow food, go to a restaurant, get your food cooked, and it comes to the table and it's been freshly cooked. It tastes better than something that's just been thrown in the microwave or thrown in the deep fat fryer. Depending on your taste, depending on what you like to eat. But I think that architecture is similarly better done in a more considered way, where you've taken your time to really think things through, really look at what possible problems could occur and come up with solutions for those. Do investigative works if you need to. Get a structural engineer to dig down, or get a contractor to dig down, and a structural engineer to check your foundations of your existing building, test the soil, get your drains surveyed so you know what condition they're in, how deep they are and where they are. Get your trees checked see where the roots are, you know, if they're going to cause any problems for future foundations. All these sorts of things you can, there are a lot of things that you can do, and the biggest cause of unexpected things is stuff that goes on underground. So the more that you can do to check your ground, for things like drains and existing foundations are like two of the biggest issues. So if you can do whatever you can to check those up front, potentially that extra few £100 that you pay early on to check them is actually going to, well, it's not necessarily going to save you loads of money, because if you have to pay to have extra deep foundations, then you're going to have to pay that anyway. But at least if you've had it checked out and you know it early on, you can account for that, and you can make reductions elsewhere. You can go for a smaller roof light and a cheaper kitchen or whatever, and keep your project within your budget, knowing that it's going to cost you a bit more on your foundations, and that not being a big surprise to you. So that's it. Hi Russell, if you're watching, it says that you're watching. Say hello if you are. I haven't seen you for a long time. Hope everything's okay. If you're got any questions about contracts, pop them in the comments below. If you've had any experience of major disasters happening on your home, and you know you wish that you could have done something about it, share your experience. You know, everybody, well, I'm not going to have a laugh about it, you know, we'll commiserate, and we'll hopefully learn something from your misfortune, and at least you can, you know, share the love in terms of helping other people not have to suffer as you have. I hope that this has been helpful. Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in, so I am going to hop off now. And if you're watching replay, put #replay, and please do comment below, and I will come back in and check that later. Okay, bye for now.